My boss promoted the woman he was secretly dating, then asked me to train her. I never thought I'd become the unpaid coach for the person who quietly took the promotion I'd spent 3 years working toward. At first, I honestly believed there had to be some mistake. I'd been with the company for almost 4 years. I rarely took sick days. I stayed late without being asked. I handled difficult clients nobody else wanted. Whenever someone quit, their workload somehow landed on my desk. My coworkers even joked that I was the unofficial assistant manager. So when our department head announced there would be an opening for senior operations lead, everyone assumed I'd get it, including me. Maybe that sounds arrogant. It wasn't. It was just logical. Even my boss, Daniel, had hinted at it for months. Earned it. I need someone reliable. When the time comes, you'll be ready. Those words kept me motivated through countless weekends spent answering emails while everyone else enjoyed their lives. Then one Monday morning, we all got an email inviting us to the conference room. I figured they were finally announcing the promotion. Daniel walked in smiling. Standing beside him was Melissa. She joined the company only 7 months earlier. She was friendly enough, but she barely knew our internal systems. Half the time, she still asked me where files were stored. Daniel cleared his throat. I'd like everyone to congratulate Melissa on becoming our new senior operations lead. Room went completely silent. For a second, I genuinely wondered if he'd said the wrong name. Melissa looked just as surprised, or at least, she acted surprised. Everyone clapped awkwardly. I forced myself to smile. Inside, my stomach had dropped straight to the floor. After the meeting, people kept stopping by my desk. Are you okay? I thought it was supposed to be you. Something happened. I had no answers. I just kept saying the same thing. I'm happy for her. It was the safest response. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't even angry yet. I was confused. That afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. He smiled like nothing unusual had happened. Got an important favor to ask. I already knew I wasn't going to like whatever came next. I'd like you to train Melissa over the next few weeks. I stared at him. Sorry. Train her. She'll need help learning the operational side of the department. Operational side, that was literally the entire job. So, she got promoted before learning how to do it. He laughed awkwardly. Everyone learns differently. I wanted to ask the obvious question, then why wasn't I promoted? Instead, I simply nodded. Sure. Sometimes keeping your composure says more than arguing ever could. The training started the next morning. Melissa sat beside me with a notebook. She was polite, very polite, almost too polite. She apologized every 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I know this is awkward. I hope you're not upset. I really didn't expect this. I kept things professional. If she asked a question, I answered. If she made a mistake, I corrected it. None of this was technically her fault, or at least that's what I believed at the time. By the end of the first week, I noticed something strange. Daniel visited her desk constantly, not just for work. He'd bring her coffee, ask if she wanted lunch, compliment her presentations that I had practically built from scratch. Meanwhile, if I solved a crisis, I'd get a quick email saying, received. Nothing more. At first, I convinced myself I was imagining things, confirmation bias, jealousy, whatever, until one Friday evening. Most people had already left. I stayed behind to finish a report before the deadline. As I walked toward the printer room, I heard laughter coming from Daniel's office. His door wasn't fully closed. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was literally walking past. Then I heard Melissa say, "You know, people are starting to notice." Daniel laughed. "Let them." She lowered her voice. "What if HR finds out?" My feet froze. HR find out what? Daniel answered almost immediately. "They won't. Besides, you're worth the risk." Silence, then another laugh, a quiet one, the kind people share when they're far too comfortable with each other. I didn't stick around. I walked straight back to my desk. Maybe there was an innocent explanation, maybe. But my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. Over the next 2 weeks, little details started adding up. Melissa arrived late almost every morning. Daniel never mentioned it. Anyone else would have received a warning. She missed deadlines. He extended them. She forgot meetings. He rescheduled them. One afternoon, she accidentally sent an unfinished spreadsheet directly to a major client. Normally, that would have been a disaster. Instead, Daniel called everyone into a meeting. Not to address her mistake, to talk about supporting one another during stressful periods. I almost laughed, because 3 months earlier I'd made a typo in an internal report. He'd written me a 2-page performance warning. That's when I stopped doubting myself. Something was definitely happening. The office started whispering. People never said anything directly, but conversations would suddenly stop whenever Melissa walked into the break room. One coworker leaned toward me while making coffee. noticed it too. Right, I pretended not to understand. Noticed what? He looked around before lowering his voice. They leave together almost every night. Another coworker added, and somehow she's always assigned the easiest projects. Someone else whispered, my friend works in accounting. Apparently Daniel approved a conference trip for just the two of them. Nobody had proof, only patterns. But patterns have a way of telling stories. One Wednesday, Melissa asked if we could grab lunch together. I almost declined. Then curiosity won. Halfway through lunch, she sighed. Feel like everyone hates me. I looked at her. I don't hate you. She stared at her salad. I didn't ask for everyone to treat me differently. That sentence stayed with me because she didn't deny they were treating her differently. She only said she hadn't asked for it. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Her entire expression changed. She smiled without realizing it. Then she quickly locked the phone. I caught only one thing before the screen disappeared. A message previewed Daniel. Can't wait for tonight. She noticed me noticing. Our eyes met. For 3 painfully awkward seconds, then she forced a smile. Work stuff. Sure, work. The next morning she avoided me completely. She barely asked questions, barely spoke. And Daniel suddenly stopped asking me to train her. Instead, he announced she'd picked things up incredibly fast. Fast. She still didn't know how to run half our reporting system. That's when I realized something. He wasn't promoting competence. He was protecting someone, and everyone else was expected to pretend not to notice. I told myself to leave it alone, go to work, do my job, collect my paycheck. But life has a funny way of dragging you into problems you never asked for, because the following Monday, HR emailed me requesting a private meeting. And what happened in that meeting completely changed everything. The HR meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. I spent the entire morning trying to convince myself it was routine. Maybe they wanted feedback about the promotion. Maybe they were conducting employee satisfaction interviews. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Still, when the clock hit 1:58, my hands were sweating. The HR manager, Karen, greeted me with a polite smile. Thanks for coming in. Her tone was warm enough that I relaxed a little. She closed the door and gestured toward the chair across from her desk. Keep this brief. I nodded. She folded her hands together. Are things going with Melissa's training? That wasn't the question I expected. I answered honestly. She's improving. Karen tilted her head. And how has Daniel been supporting the transition? The wording caught my attention. Supporting the transition, not leading it, not managing it, supporting it. I chose my words carefully. He checks in with her often. Karen wrote something down, then she asked another question. Have you noticed anything unusual in the department recently? My heart skipped. This wasn't casual. Someone had already raised concerns. I could feel it. For several seconds, I debated what to say. I wasn't interested in office gossip. I wasn't about to accuse anyone without proof, so I kept my answer simple. There have been questions about how the promotion was handled. Karen didn't react, she simply nodded. Appreciate your honesty. That was it. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. She thanked me for my time and said I could return to work. When I walked back into the office, Daniel looked up from his computer. His eyes followed me all the way to my desk. He knew I'd been in HR. The question was how. I hadn't told anyone. Neither had Karen. That evening, just as I was packing my bag, Daniel appeared beside my desk. Got a minute? His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. We stepped into one of the empty meeting rooms. He closed the door. I heard HR wanted to chat. There it was. I kept my expression neutral. They asked about the transition. He leaned against the table, answered their questions. He watched me for a long moment. You know, loyalty is important in management. That sentence sat in the air like a warning. Always been loyal to this company, I replied. I mean loyalty to your team. There it was again, not the company, not ethics, not honesty, just loyalty. I smiled politely. I don't discuss private HR conversations. The first time since I'd worked with him, Daniel looked genuinely irritated. He straightened his tie. I hope you understand who's been supporting your career all these years. I almost laughed. Supporting had earned every performance review, every completed project, every overtime hour. None of that had been handed to me. Always appreciated opportunities to grow, I said. His jaw tightened. Good. Then he walked away. The next few weeks were strange. Almost overnight, my workload doubled. Projects that normally belonged to 3 people somehow became my responsibility. Every tiny mistake was suddenly pointed out. Emails I'd sent hundreds of times before were returned with comments like, please be more careful. Meanwhile, Melissa seemed uncomfortable. She avoided eye contact. If Daniel praised her during meetings, she'd quickly change the subject. She no longer seemed excited about the promotion. One afternoon, she quietly approached my desk. "Can we talk?" We went outside to a small bench behind the office building. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sighed. "Owe you an apology." I looked at her. "What? For everything?" I frowned. "I don't know what you mean." She stared at the ground. I knew people would assume things. My stomach tightened. She continued. "I didn't think it would get this bad." "You mean the rumors?" She nodded slowly. "Not completely wrong. There it was, not a denial, not even close." I stayed silent. She took a deep breath. Daniel and I started seeing each other, even though I'd suspected it for weeks. Hearing it out loud felt completely different. She quickly added, "It wasn't supposed to happen." Apparently, they'd met at an industry networking event months before she joined the company. At the time, she'd had no idea he'd eventually become her direct manager by the time she was hired. They were already involved. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Did HR know?" She shook her head immediately. "No. Anyone?" "No. So you accepted a promotion from someone you were secretly dating." Her eyes filled with guilt. "I told him I didn't want it." I raised an eyebrow. "But you still accepted." She looked away. "Yes." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, "I thought I could prove I deserved it afterward." I understood the logic, but it was impossible. No matter how hard she worked from that point on, everyone would always question how she'd gotten there. "You should tell HR," I said quietly. Her head snapped up. "I can't." "Not." "Because Daniel said if anyone found out, both of us could lose everything." I looked at her carefully. For the first time, I realized she wasn't acting confident anymore. She looked exhausted, scared, like someone carrying around a secret that had become far heavier than she'd expected. Before I could respond, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and immediately stood up. "Have to go." She walked away so quickly she almost forgot her coffee on the bench. I watched her disappear back into the building. Something about that conversation didn't sit right with me. She wasn't talking like someone enjoying special treatment. She sounded like someone trapped in a situation she no longer knew how to escape. And 2 days later, the situation exploded. Not because of me, not because of Melissa, but because someone anonymously sent HR a folder filled with screenshots, photos, and emails that nobody in the office even knew existed. The office felt different the moment I walked in that Thursday morning. People weren't chatting by the coffee machine. No one was laughing. Instead, everyone kept glancing toward Daniel's office. His door was shut, the blinds were closed. That almost never happened. Around 9:30, Karen from HR walked in with another manager I'd only seen a handful of times from corporate. Neither of them smiled. They knocked once before entering Daniel's office. The door closed behind them. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. By lunchtime, the entire department had stopped pretending not to notice. Every conversation eventually circled back to the same question. What's going on? Nobody knew. Or at least, nobody admitted they knew. Melissa hadn't come in that morning. Her desk was empty. Her computer was off. Her phone went straight to voicemail whenever clients tried calling. Daniel finally stepped out just after 1 o'clock. He looked different. His tie was crooked. His face had lost all its color. He walked straight past everyone without saying a word. Karen followed him a few seconds later. She calmly addressed the office. "Business will continue as normal this afternoon. If anyone has urgent questions, please direct them to me." That was all she said, which somehow made everyone even more nervous. About an hour later, I received another email from HR. "Please meet with us at 3:00 p.m. again." This time there were 3 people waiting. Karen, the corporate manager, and someone from the legal department. They thanked me for coming. Karen spoke first. "We're conducting an internal review regarding potential conflicts of interest." I nodded. "We understand you worked closely with both Daniel and Melissa." I did. Legal representative slid a folder onto the table. Inside were printed screenshots, restaurant reservations, photos from weekends, hotel confirmations, text messages. Some of the dates went back nearly a year, long before Melissa had been promoted. One message stood out. Daniel had written, "Once you're promoted, nobody can question why we're working so closely together." I felt my stomach sink. Karen watched my reaction carefully. "Have you ever seen these before?" "No." "You know about their relationship?" I suspected something was going on. "You had no direct knowledge." "Not until Melissa admitted they were seeing each other." Karen immediately looked up. "She admitted it." I realized I'd just shared something important. I nodded slowly. "She told me 2 days ago." Karen wrote several notes, then she asked the question I hadn't expected. "Did she indicate whether she felt pressured in any way?" I thought carefully. Melissa had seemed frightened, exhausted, but she'd never actually used that word. I can't speak for how she felt, I answered honestly. She seemed overwhelmed. Karen thanked me. The meeting ended shortly afterward. When I returned to my desk, everyone immediately looked up. I ignored the curious stares. I wasn't about to discuss an active investigation. By Friday morning, Daniel still hadn't returned. An email arrived from corporate. It was only 3 sentences long. Daniel is currently on administrative leave while an internal review is conducted. During this period, please direct all operational matters to interim manager Rebecca Collins. Office exploded. People gathered in little groups. Rumors flew faster than emails. Some claimed Daniel had resigned. Others insisted he'd been fired already. One coworker swore security had escorted him out through a side entrance the night before. No one knew what was true. Late that afternoon, Melissa finally came in. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders slumped. Instead of sitting at her desk, she walked straight to HR nearly 2 hours later. She came back carrying a cardboard box. Silence fell across the office. Without saying a word, she began packing her things, family photos, a coffee mug, a small plant, the notebook she'd used while I trained her. Nobody knew what to say. As she reached my desk, she stopped. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I really am. I looked at her for a long moment. I believe you. Tears filled her eyes. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I know, she nodded once. Then she picked up her box and walked out of the office. That was the last time I saw her. The following week felt strangely peaceful. No tension, no whispered conversations, no constant interruptions from Daniel. For the first time in months, everyone simply worked. Then, on Wednesday morning, Rebecca called me into her office. She smiled. A position has officially become available. I already knew which one, she continued. We're reopening the senior operations lead promotion. My heart started racing. This time, the hearing panel will include corporate leadership and HR. Exactly how it should have been from the beginning. Rebecca slid a folder across the desk. Like you to apply. I smiled. I already have my resume updated. She laughed. I had a feeling. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful, not because someone had fallen, not because anyone had lost their job, but because the opportunity would finally be earned instead of quietly handed to someone behind closed doors. I walked out of her office feeling lighter than I had in months. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong, because 3 days before the interviews, I received an anonymous envelope on my desk. Inside was a single flash drive, and attached to it was a handwritten note that simply read, "You still don't know the whole story about Daniel." I stared at the flash drive for a full minute. No name, no return address, no fingerprints that I could see, just a plain white envelope and a single sentence. You still don't know the whole story about Daniel. Looked around the office. Everyone was busy. Nobody seemed to be watching me. For a second, I considered plugging it into my work computer. Then common sense kicked in. Absolutely not. You don't connect unknown USB drives to company devices. I slipped it into my bag and forgot about it until I got home. Well, I tried to forget about it. Instead, it sat on my kitchen table all evening, silently daring me to look. Finally, curiosity won. I found an old laptop I hadn't used in years, one that wasn't connected to any of my personal accounts. I plugged in the drive. There was only one folder. Inside were PDFs, screenshots, and scanned expense reports. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the dates caught my attention. The reports stretched back almost 3 years, long before Melissa had ever joined the company. There were reimbursement requests for expensive dinners labeled as client meetings, luxury hotel stays listed as business travel, weekend trips marked as training conferences. Except, many of those events had never actually happened. I recognized some of the dates because I'd been working those weekends. Daniel had claimed he was meeting clients while the rest of us covered his responsibilities. According to these documents, the company had been paying for personal expenses all along. Then I opened another folder. This one contained emails, not romantic emails, financial ones, approvals, receipts, expense claims. Some had handwritten notes in the margins questioning unusual charges. Those questions had apparently gone unanswered. Whoever sent me the flash drive wasn't trying to expose a relationship anymore. They were pointing toward something much bigger. I closed the laptop. This wasn't office gossip. This wasn't office politics. If the documents were genuine, they suggested serious misconduct. I wasn't qualified to investigate them myself, The next morning, I brought the envelope straight to Karen in. Need to give you something. She looked surprised. When she saw the flash drive, her expression immediately became serious. Did you open it? I did. You copy anything? No, she nodded. Thank you for bringing it directly to us. I didn't ask what would happen next. Honestly, I didn't want to know. My focus had shifted. The promotion interviews were only a few days away. I refused to let someone else's choices consume my life any longer, so I prepared. Every evening after work, I reviewed project results. I organized reports I'd led. I wrote down examples of difficult situations I'd handled, not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted to remind myself how much I'd actually accomplished. For months, I'd started doubting my own abilities. Watching someone less experienced leap ahead can do that to you. It quietly makes you question whether your hard work ever mattered. Preparing for the interview reminded me that it did. Interview day arrived. This time, there wasn't just one manager asking questions. There were 4 people on the panel: Rebecca, Karen, a director from corporate, and another senior manager from a different office. No Daniel. No closed-door decisions. No mysterious promises. Just questions, real questions. They asked how I handled conflict, how I managed deadlines, how I trained new employees. Ironically, my experience training Melissa became one of my strongest examples. I explained how I documented processes, answered questions patiently, and kept the team running despite unexpected changes. The panel listened carefully. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked at their phone. When the interview ended, Rebecca smiled. Thank you. We'll be making our decision shortly. Waiting was torture. Every email notification made my heart race. Every phone call made me jump. Finally, late Friday afternoon, I received a calendar invitation. Meeting 4:30 p.m. I walked into the conference room expecting another formal conversation. Instead, the entire leadership team was there. Rebecca stood first. Like to congratulate you. I smiled before she even finished. Been selected as our new senior operations lead. For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because it was unexpected, because it had taken so long to hear words I'd worked years to earn. Rebecca handed me the offer letter. This promotion reflects your performance, professionalism, and the respect you've earned from your colleagues. Those words meant more than the title itself, because they couldn't be questioned. Nobody would whisper that I'd received special treatment. Nobody would wonder what happened behind closed doors. I'd earned it, the right way. A week later, corporate held a department meeting. They announced that Daniel was no longer employed by the company following the completion of the internal review. They didn't discuss details, and no one asked. As for Melissa, I eventually heard through a former coworker that she'd found a position at another company in a different city. I genuinely hoped she'd learned from everything that happened, not because I wanted revenge, but because everyone deserves the chance to make better choices after painful mistakes. Looking back now, the promotion wasn't the biggest lesson. The biggest lesson was this: when people build success on secrets, they're constantly afraid those secrets will come to light. When you build your career on consistent work, honesty, and patience, it may take longer. But when you finally succeed, no one can take that away from you. And every time I train a new employee now, I make sure they know one thing from day one. In this department, opportunities are earned, not quietly handed to someone's favorite behind a closed office door.